Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. One of the questions I get asked most frequently is how do I find fish fast? A lot of us are taking trips to new lakes, whether it's for a vacation, maybe it's for a tournament. And the fact of the matter is, we don't have 2 weeks to break these lakes down. So it's a lot of it comes down to how do we break them down fast to put ourselves in part of the lake that's got a larger concentration of fish. And I think it's something that you see the pros do very, very successfully. And it's something that, in my opinion, is not talked about frequently, but it's not a hard thing to break down. Now, generally speaking, you'll hear people talk about, well, find the bait fish, find the bass. Yeah, that's generally true, but you can also find tons and tons of bait in areas where you're not catching bass. In fact, I think sometimes you can have way too much bait. But the reality is, I'm not even looking at bait. I'm not looking at anything other than contour lines. So I really want to break this down with you, and I think it'll really help you achieve success on lakes that you're unfamiliar with in a much, much faster scenario. Today's video is brought to you by the Deep Dive app, which will help you select the best fishing places in the lake with features like the lake level, the current flow, the top baits tool, which will help you select the best baits for certain locations throughout the lake. Whether that's a clear water, stained water, dirty water, it'll choose the best bait for that location, provide you with all the information like what structure, what retrieve, different reel, all of the information that you need to catch the fish. This is in the app. The cool part about this app, though, is it's not just based on areas. It does provide you with specific tournament winning data that has been collected to help you figure out your best choices for baits and locations for whatever region of the lake it is that you want to fish. On top of that, not only does the app provide you with best locations, it gives you water clarity as well. So maybe you're on a lake like Lake Eufaula, where there is a bunch of different water clarity located throughout the entire lake. This will help you identify the clearest portions as well as the dirtiest portions of the lake. Plus, the Deep Dive app has now added the wind effect map, which is going to take all of the different wind conditions for the past couple of days and show you what banks on the lake are being hit the hardest. They also have inflow points that show you different places throughout the lake where your water is being flushed into the lake through different ditches and creeks and rivers, providing you with high percentage places to fish and letting you know what parts of the lake are going to be the best areas after a rain. Check out the Deep Dive app to help you become a better angler. So this primarily just comes down to your contour lines, like I mentioned previously. The two main things that you're going to want to look for on your contour maps are flats as well as creek channels or ditches or some sort of migration route. This works for both your reservoirs as well as your natural lakes. They're just a little bit different because on your natural lakes you don't have, say, a direct influx of water, whether that's an old river channel or old creek channel, but you're still going to have pretty good defined contour lines in the scenarios that I think you're going to be looking for. So let's look at this picture I've got up. This happens to be just the main river channel with a creek coming into it. And if you look at the mouth of the creek, you've got a very defined flat and you've got a very defined creek channel. And the reason this is important is because the bass love to utilize steep breaking contour lines to push bait fish into, and they love to use flats as generally as a feeding area and areas to live. This allows them really quick access to both deep water as well as shallow water. And generally speaking, because you have potential for influx of water that's coming from the creek as well as down the main river channel, you've got fresh water that's moving through those areas. And anytime you have potential current, you've got really good feeding locations. So if you have a flat, that's a really good place for bass to push shad up onto. And if you've got those steep contour lines, that's what they use as ambush locations and places to corral the bait fish. So in this case, you can very clearly see that there is a defined creek channel as well as a defined flat. Now, if we look at this other picture, this is just a small creek that's coming into the main lake, but there's not a very good defined creek channel. There's no river channel. It's really just a bay in itself. Now, this is the same lake, so it's still a reservoir, but there's no really good defined areas for the bass to corral bait. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not using this shallow bay, but what it means is you're going to spend a lot more time trying to identify where the fish are in this bay. I'm sure there's some that live there, but you probably don't have a large concentration of fish, just like you would in the earlier picture where you've got a defined creek channel coming into the main lake with a prime feeding flat. So you're going to have bass that live all over the lake. But what you're really looking for are where you have, you know, defined channels and defined flats coming together. Now, if you happen to be on a natural lake where you don't have an actual defined creek, what you're going to be looking for are your big flats still. You're still looking for flats, but you want to find flats that have a defined edge. Something that generally has some steep dropping contour lines, so that goes from shallow water to deep water, because the fish will utilize those areas the same way. And if it happens to be a large natural lake, you're going to see that there is current flow, and that current flow will be along those larger, steeper contour lines. Now, if you happen to be on a natural lake where you don't have any quick drop off, where it just happens to be a slow taper down into the lake, those are going to be areas, again, similar to that shallow flat bay on the reservoir, where you just have a hard time identifying where those fish are. Does not mean there's not going to be fish there. In fact, if you're able to find spots on those flats, a lot of times that's the stuff you're going to have to yourself. The problem is if you're only there for 2 days of vacation, or you only have 1 day of pre-fishing, it's a lot harder to find that needle in the haystack on a less defined flat with not defined contour lines than it would be on a flat that has those steep dropping contour lines, or a creek channel where there just happens to be a much greater population of fish that utilize those areas. So anytime you're heading to a new lake, if you're really looking to break the lake down fast, identify all of the creek channels / river channels, as well as your largest flats in the lake. Those are going to be your prime areas that generally have a much larger concentration of fish. And again, that a lot of that goes back to bass overall tend to be shallower. They tend to live in shallower water. So if you have bigger flats that are 20 foot of water or less, they're going to utilize that more throughout the year for all different phases of the bass life cycle than, say, if you happen to be down by the dam where you have a ton of 100 foot of water. There obviously will be fish that are suspended chasing bait, but those are a lot harder to identify, a lot harder to find. And when you have minimal time, you're not going to be nearly as successful as you would be if you were finding those large flats with defined channels or contour lines that go through them. So hopefully this helps you. Next time you head out to the lake, if you're looking to break down your lake fast, look for the biggest flats, look for the most defined contour lines around those flats. And you're going to find the part of the lake that has the majority of the bass living in it. So guys, hopefully this was helpful. If it was, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow.